Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome back to my channel. As you can probably tell, we are incredibly casual today, but I have a really interesting case to talk to you guys about, and you have probably already seen this on YouTube. Now, this case took place probably about 4 years ago. It's still open right now, but this is all about the unsolved deaths of Lisanne Froon as well as Kris Kremers. Back in April of 2014, both of these young women went missing in Boquete, Panama. I can say it, Boquete, Panama. There are a lot of theories surrounding this case, and I think the saddest part is just the fact that the friends and family of Lisanne as well as Kris do not have any sort of definitive answers as to what actually happened. So in March of 2014, a 22-year-old Dutch native Lisanne Froon and 21-year-old Kris Kremers took a trip to Panama. They were celebrating Lisanne's graduation from school as well as doing some teaching in the area. They had also planned on relaxing a bit, so after reaching Panama, they did spend 2 weeks just touring the area. They hung out with a couple of fellow Dutch friends and they did a little bit of partying. And then they did go ahead and they arrived in the small town of Boquete. Now in Boquete, they stayed with a host family and their dog, Blue. And on April 1st, around 11 a.m., the girls took an excursion out with Blue, the dog, to explore the town and hike around the clouded forest that surrounded the Baru volcano, even though they were scheduled to visit that area with a tour guide the next day, which I thought was kind of interesting. It is assumed that the girls did not know how dangerous and easy it was to get lost in the forest, and unfortunately, a quick hike sadly turned into basically a battle for their lives. Several hours after the girls disappeared, the host family's dog, Blue, actually returned back home, and he did not have Lisanne or Kris with him. So obviously the host family was a little concerned. They went ahead and they reached out to Lisanne as well as Kris's family, and they asked if they had heard from them. Now, Lisanne and Kris did have good relationships with their parents, and while they were vacationing, they had been texting and sending a ton of photos of their travels to their family. So when the host family called and asked their parents, hey, have you heard from them? They replied with, actually, no, we have not heard from them today, which was obviously very alarming. Now, as I told you guys, they had actually booked for a tour guide, somebody who is a local, to bring them around the area into the forest the following morning at 9 a.m. They missed that appointment, which means that they were overnight in the forest for the first night. And they were there for days, and who knows how long they survived. It's absolutely horrible, but I can just imagine how scary that must feel. So the tour guide was very worried because he knows, especially in this area, there's a lot of stuff that goes on in the forest. It is incredibly difficult to get through. There are wild animals everywhere. You don't go in there unless you have a tour guide with you. And I don't really know why they decided to go ahead and kind of hike by themselves. I get the feeling, and a lot of people do think this as well, that maybe they went out thinking that they were just going to go around town, but the town was so small, and they thought, hey, why don't we just go for a little bit of a hike. Now, on April 3rd, authorities began aerial searches of the forest for the girls, but unfortunately they came up empty-handed. And on April 6th, Kris and Lisanne's parents arrived in Panama. Alongside police, they came with search crews as well as detectives from the Netherlands to continue the search for their missing daughters. 10 weeks later, a local woman actually found Lisanne's backpack and brought it in to the police. The backpack had a water bottle in it, 2 pairs of sunglasses, Lisanne's passport, $83 in cash. It had 2 bras and both Lisanne and Kris's phones. Everything appeared to be dry and in good condition, so this sparked some hope that they may be able to find the girls alive after all. Once the police were able to get into their phones and get past their security system, you know, the little PIN code and all that kind of stuff, they saw that somebody had been dialing 112, which is the emergency number for the Netherlands, as well as 911. The first couple of distress calls actually came in just a few hours after they had initially started their hike. One was from Kris's iPhone, and the second one was from Lisanne's Samsung Galaxy. None of the calls got through except for one of them, and this is just absolutely horrible, but every single call that they made throughout this whole entire ordeal, it wouldn't go through because there was no reception. But there was one call on April 3rd that went through for 2.5 seconds, and that was it. And then they lost the call. I cannot imagine the feeling of being lost, knowing that you're lost, and finally one call goes through for 2.5 seconds, somebody was on the other line, and then the reception went out again. And it's just really horrifying to see how many SOS calls they made during this whole entire trip. It's really devastating, and it's horrible. Can you imagine feeling lost like that and knowing that you're lost and knowing you're in trouble, the sun's about to go down, you know, you only have your friend there? Very, very, very scary. Now, the police did also notice that on the 6th of April, multiple attempts to get into Kris's iPhone were made. Now, some people are saying that's very, very strange, but the thing is that Kris's phone was the only one that made it through with battery life. On April 5th, Lisanne's phone did die. So there were multiple attempts to get into Kris's iPhone, and people had questions about this. So obviously they only had one cell phone now because Lisanne's phone had died. But was Lisanne trying to get into her phone without her knowing, or had Kris already possibly passed away and she needed to get into the iPhone? Did somebody find them and was trying to get into the iPhone? They were putting in the little code and it just kept saying incorrect, incorrect, incorrect. It just seemed kind of odd. Now, between the 7th and 10th of April, it actually showed that calls to emergency numbers on the iPhone had been attempted 77 times. So that makes me believe that it probably was Lisanne then, right? Because obviously if somebody is calling over and over and over again SOS, I don't know if somebody possibly found them. Why would they call an emergency number 77 times? So it makes me think that possibly something could have happened to Kris and Lisanne needed to get into the phone. When you do have an iPhone, you are allowed to make emergency calls without having to put the passcode in, but she made the 77 different calls and unfortunately she could not get service anywhere. So none of them went through. Now, on April 11th, the phone was turned on again at 10:51, and then it was turned off for the very last time again at 11:56 a.m. The iPhone also showed an arrangement of 90 different flash photos that were taken somewhere in the forest in the pitch black one night. Police thought maybe the girls were trying to use the flash to see their way around or even to scare off wildlife. A couple of photos showed they might have been near a body of water. Some showed a rock with a stick on it wrapped in candy wrappers and toilet paper, and another showed the back of Kris's head, which appeared to be bleeding. Now, over the next few weeks, they were able to discover Kris's jeans. They were actually neatly folded on top of a rock where the local woman had originally found Lisanne's backpack. So kind of strange that they were just neatly folded on top of the rock, but again, this could have been early on. Now, it's also a possibility that there was some foul play involved. I mean, it's kind of strange to have jeans just folded up on a rock. Very, very convenient. And what I'm about to tell you guys next is even more shocking. A few months later, in the same exact area, they found a bleached pelvic bone as well as basically a severed foot in a boot. Now, it wasn't necessarily severed because this looked like it was an accident from the elements. I don't know if you guys know this, but ankles are actually incredibly, incredibly fragile, and if you fall a certain way, you can actually basically, it's almost like decapitating your ankle and it will come right off. They did discover after doing DNA tests that the foot as well as the bleached pelvic bone belonged to Lisanne. Now, in the same area soon after, they found 33 bones widely scattered along a river. DNA tests confirmed they belonged to both girls, which I thought was kind of interesting. Kris's bones appeared to have been bleached and Lisanne still had skin attached to them. So that is the whole backstory, you guys. I think it should also be noted that the parents were very cooperative throughout the whole thing. They actually put up like a $30,000 award for anybody that would go and find their daughters, or really any sort of information would have been helpful, even if someone just saw something, you know, a $30,000 award, nobody ever came forward. So now we're gonna go ahead and talk a little bit about the theories. Now, I could literally make a whole video just dedicated to what people think happened here. So I'm gonna walk you guys through what I think is most probable. And please let me know down below if you have different theories. Like, let's keep this case alive. I hope that, you know, if something did happen and it was foul play, that they can find the person who did this. You know, it's always good to spread information and continue to talk about things. So please leave your thoughts down below. But the first theory I want to talk about is the cartel theory. And basically, people strongly believe, because that forest tends to be a dangerous place, not only because of the animals and not only because once you go in, if you don't have a tour guide, you know, you won't be finding your way out. They also say that because there's a lot of shady business that goes on down there. The cartel, there's drugs, there's lots of stuff that gets pushed through that forest. And the reason for that is because obviously they're not going to get caught if they're doing business in there. So it's very possible. I mean, these girls were wandering everywhere trying to find service. What are the odds that maybe they ran into someone and they thought, oh my God, you're going to help me, and it ended up being a cartel member? The bleached pelvic bone personally gives me vibes that somebody was trying to wash something away. And I think you know where I'm going with this. It was a pelvic bone. Is it possible she was raped by someone and they were trying to remove all DNA and evidence? Again, a lot of people were saying there was a serial killer after them and was like stalking them through the forest. That's very possible as well, but I definitely think there was a little bit of foul play involved. All right, and the second theory that I personally believe also took place is just nature. I think they definitely were probably starving, dehydrated. They could have been stalked by someone. Maybe they knew someone was, you know, watching them. We don't know because they couldn't get any of their calls through. But absolutely, how scary it would be to be in, basically, it's like being in a jungle. Can you imagine all the animals in there? Can you imagine the sounds at nighttime? You're just there with your friend, and you could see, Lisanne took that photo of, you know, Kris's head, and it was bleeding. You know, it looked like they had already injured themselves. And this severed foot, I mean, it wasn't so severed. I think that they really thought that she fell a certain way and it just broke right off. So these girls were probably incredibly malnourished, incredibly dehydrated, not feeling well. Yeah, I think that the elements beat them down. But I personally think that there was foul play involved, whether it be the cartel or a serial killer, or I don't know. You know, there's so many possibilities. Some random person found them, you know, or maybe somebody found their body and then decided, I'm going to go ahead and bleach those bones. But that doesn't sound right to me. Do you guys know what I mean? So for me personally, if I was going to speculate about a theory, I would say it's a combination of the elements as well as possibly some kind of foul play. But those are just my opinions. If you have any opinions on this particular case, please let me know down below. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys in my next one. Bye.